great to be with you all this evening. Some familiar faces, some folks I've not met for the first time. Always a pleasure. I was telling Mary and a few other folks, Audubon's sort of a sabbatical policy for people that have been with the organization for more than 10 years. I've been with Audubon for 12 years. My sabbatical starts on Thursday. And I just want you to know, I feel like a college kid who's about to get out for the summer. But I want you to know, I put 100% dedication into this presentation tonight, my preparations for it. At no point am I only thinking about my sabbatical. I brought that up just so you all know that I'm dedicated, I'm a professional, but also it is an interesting time to kind of reflect on your time in your career. So I've been with the organization for 12 years. I've got to work on a lot of cool stuff. What I'm going to talk about tonight is the only thing I've gotten to work on that has spanned that entire 12 years. And if I went back, I probably gave presentations on this bird and some of the things I'll talk about tonight for the last 12 years. And it's always been, oh, here's what we want to do next. And so for me, it's kind of interesting, I hope for y'all too, to get to see kind of like what we didn't know then and where we were to kind of where we are today. Because to me, it is like almost been like a full arc of conservation story. It's not over yet, but anyway, we'll go through it tonight. I think also in 12 years, you can look back and maybe reflect on like some existential moments where you're doing your job and you think, or this happens maybe in your life, you think, how did I get to this point in where I am? And that slide you saw for a moment. This is me in the middle, and I was in Colombia, the country of Colombia, in the city of Barranquilla at a school, on stage with students who had prepared a dance for our visit to the school, and had asked me to don the mask that they had made as part of this dance. And this is a ridiculous photo, and I felt ridiculous at the moment. And apparently there's a video of this that somewhere is out there that I'm hoping never sees the light of day. Because at one point I was on the ground. I don't know. I blacked out for a little bit. But it's funny because I look at this and I'm like, so many series of events had to happen to get to this point. And I'll explain the context. We'll come back to it later. But I started with Audubon. We're going to go from South Carolina down to Colombia, and basically it's birds that take us there. So I started Audubon in 2013, and this little bird that I'm holding in my hand, I'll talk more about it. It's called a Prothonotary Warbler. Has anybody here ever seen a Prothonotary Warbler? Some of you have. Bright yellow. Some people call them flying lemons. I'll talk more about them as we go, but I think about, again, my history and like all these things that had to happen. Coming to Audubon, I had a lot of passion, but I don't feel like I knew a lot. And we had a lot of interest in studying birds, but I didn't come in with a ton of experience. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of that history of kind of what we've done over the last few years that got me to dancing at school with a bunch of students in Barraquila, Colombia. And as Mary mentioned, how many folks have ever been to Beidler Forest? Good number of you. For those of you that haven't, it is an Audubon sanctuary that is about 18,000 acres in size. It's about an hour from here, a little over an hour. What you're seeing here is a 1.5 miles long, a little bit longer than that elevated boardwalk. It's the longest boardwalk in South Carolina. It goes continuously through the swamp there. And what's notable about it is that the original tract that was protected there has never been logged. It's original growth. You can kind of see, if you look here, there's a monster bald cypress tree. The tree is over 1,000 years old. So we have lots and lots of trees that are that age, and basically an ecosystem that has never been altered by people. It looks the way they were looking about 1,000 years ago. We are open to the public. Wednesday through Sunday, come in today, take a self-guided tour. We also do a lot of guided programs. From March until about September, a lot of people are coming to see these little yellow birds that we have there. They can actually nest at Beidler. But this is where I get to work pretty much every day, so it's a very, very fun place to get to work. And if I y'all have never been, come out and check it out. But I'm going to talk a little bit about these birds in particular, why we got to study them, what about them is notable, How do we actually manage to track a bird that's this small? This is a type of warbler, again, called the Prothonotary Warbler. It's got a very difficult name to pronounce. It used to be called the Golden Swamp Warbler. That's a much more descriptive name for where you might find them and what they look like. Prothonotary would probably more accurately be pronounced Prothonotary. A prothonotary, if you Googled that word, you might see like a clerkship. And prothonotary was a clerk in the Roman Catholic Church. They wore a yellow robe with a gray hood. And that's how these birds got their names. So prothonotary, we of course changed to prothonotary, but that's sort of the etymology and the history of that particular name. Bright yellow bird. Just showing you here two individuals, female on the left, male on the right. So the male's very bright yellow on their head, on their the back of their neck, all along their breast, bright white in their tail as they fly. The female's a very pretty, more of like an olivey yellow, a little drabber in appearance, about the same size. So a series of things that we kind of knew, I guess talking about these birds when I came to Audubon, so looking about like 12 years ago. First off, it's a bird that we've always been interested in and concerned about because it exhibited long-term population decline. You can see about a 40% decline over the last, since the 1960s, so the last 60 or so years. That's all based on data from the Breeding Bird Survey, which is the longest running sort of census of birds during the nesting season. If you think about the Christmas bird count, the Breeding Bird Survey is like the Christmas bird count for the summer, for the spring and the summer. So long-term population decline. We also have known and have always known that they show up at Beidler. They're a migratory bird. They show up at Beidler in late March. Everybody always calls us in mid-March. It's like, when's the first prothonotary going to be there? We don't know. Can't predict it. We kind of actually do now we have like a fun predict the day because everybody kind of wants to know. It averages probably the last week of March. And it's always the males that show up first, about a week before the females. And then they all, usually by the second week of April, we're all there. So the question is, where are they coming from? How did they get there? What route did they take? There's all these sort of things. But we know they show up. People come here to see them. They nest in cavities, and that's notable because there's no other warbler in the eastern United States that is a cavity nester. So talking with some folks earlier about bluebirds, and an ideal nest for a prothonotary warbler would be taking a bluebird box and sticking it out in the middle of a swamp. Prothonotary warblers nest over standing water, really only fresh water. And they need to be in areas with sustainable water pretty much throughout the year. So swamps, bottomland hardwoods along the edges of river corridors, those sorts of places. But they will readily, they nest in cavities, but they will readily also nest in human-made nest boxes. So you can see some examples of that here. But in things like bald cypress knees, have you ever seen the bald cypress knee, right? Those weird stump-like structures that grow out from the bald cypress tree. Hollow trunks, those sorts of things. This is where these birds historically nest at Beidler. This is where they still nest. In fact, this photo here is a famous photo. It was one of the Audubon Photography Award winners taken at Beidler, I guess now maybe 10 or so years ago. So they are a cavity nester. They show up. They show up in March. They're nesting by April. They usually go through two broods, so they'll nest and then they'll nest again. And the interesting thing about their nesting is that it is super quick. So they will lay eggs, usually 4 to 6 eggs, and it only takes 12 days for those eggs to hatch, 10 days from when they hatch until those little birds fly off. So this right here, this is a bird that, these are probably day 2, and this is day 10. I mean, so they go really quick. And so, but it makes sense if you're nesting in an open cavity. They also generally nest close to the ground. So usually on the boardwalk at Beidler, you're looking down at them or at eye level. That makes them more susceptible to predators. So get in there and get it done quickly is really interesting. And if you come to Beidler when they are nesting, first of all, I usually tell people, just look for the photographers. The photographers are going to be there taking photos, but those birds will come back and forth to the nest all day long. You say, how do these little birds, all 5 or 6 of them, get from that to that in like a week? And it's because they're fed, gorged with food basically all day long during that period of time. Other really interesting thing about them, we have known from a little bit of banding, which I'll talk about again in a second, is that they show high site fidelity, meaning they come back to the same places year after year. So we see Prothonotary warblers show up in March, about August, September, they take off. We don't usually see them anymore. They show back up, but from the little birds that we banded, a few of them we banded, we realized that this is the same bird we banded last year, and not only will they show up back at Beidler Forest, but some of them will come back to the same acre that they were in the year before. So they will come back year after year, not to the same swamp, to the same acre. We even have birds that use the same cabin from one year to the next. Very rare. They also get the name swamp canary. Yes, they're bright yellow, that's helpful, but also you think about like the canary in a coal mine. Prothonotary warblers are great barometers of the health of wetlands because they are dependent on other things that live in those wetlands. What is it? What can y'all tell? What is the mouth of this Prothonotary warbler? Not a moth. Good guess. Think about a little flying critter that emerges from the water. Usually mass. Yes, mayflies. That's a mayfly. Mayflies are very sensitive to pollution. So we tend to see higher populations of mayflies and healthier ecosystems. Same thing happens with some dragonflies, damselflies. By the way, all of these organisms that start their life in the water. I don't think I knew that growing up. That like a dragonfly starts its life underwater. It lives most of its life underwater, and it emerges just to be the flying adult, and then it lays its eggs in the water before it dies. So the organisms that are living in the water are very important for Prothonotary warblers. So the fact that a Prothonotary warbler is able to gorge its chicks on mayflies means you got a pretty healthy swamp. So great barometer of ecosystem health. Those are things that we did know. What we did not know was where are they going when they leave? You know, we really didn't have any way of knowing that beyond knowing generally the range of where they are in the winter. What routes are they taking? You just think about migratory birds in general. Like here we are, it's 7:45, just getting dark outside. There are millions of birds taking off over our heads right now. They're gonna fly all night long, and they're gonna land where? And what are they gonna do all day? They're gonna probably feed, and then maybe they'll do it again. And they're doing this at night, making these long distance trips. How do they know when to leave? How do they know to orient themselves? How do they know when they've gotten to where they're going? And then how do they know when it's time to come back? How do they orient themselves, not just back to a spot, but to the same spot where they were the year before? And what if that spot isn't there anymore? There are all these questions we have about bird migration. And for us, we apply them to Prothonotaries. And when they're migrating, again, how high are they going? How long are they flying? What are some of those threats? And then what is happening on wherever it is that they're going? Who's working down there? Is habitat being protected? Do people care? Are there people we can actually be working with? These are all these sorts of things that, at least when I came to Audubon, we were really starting to ask ourselves. And I was very fortunate to come at a time where, one, I had a lot of people that supported the work that I wanted to do. I had people that had already started it to some degree at Beidler Forest. And what they did was they started going out and catching these birds and putting bans on them. So we continued to do that, starting from when I came to Audubon late in 2013, starting in 2014, and every year since then, we go out along our boardwalk every April and May and June, and we catch all the birds around the boardwalk, and we put a series of colorful bands on their legs. Well, let me ask you this: why would we put yellow, orange, white, whatever? Why put those bands on them?
Identify where they're abandoned.
You can identify them without having to recapture them. So you can put a series of bands on their legs, and you don't put the same arrangement on any bird, so that that bird shows back up the next day, the next year, 3 or 4 years later, you know exactly which bird it is. So every bird gets a unique arrangement of colorful bands. So we can identify them uniquely just by sight. We don't have to recapture them year after year. So, but banding the birds only tells you so much. And the other, but again, sort of thinking about some fortuitous things that have happened, people that supported the work, people that had already started the work, the miniaturization of technology. So I don't know if y'all noticed in this photo, there's also, in addition to band, there's also a little device on the back of this bird. That is a tracking device called a geolocator. And a geolocator, it is basically a tiny little computer with a battery and a light sensor. And it records light levels. And it's taking daily light levels. It does not work in real time. You have to put it on a bird, that bird goes wherever it's going, it comes back, you have to recapture it and download the data from it. And then you have to run it through all this like sophisticated statistical software, but you can infer a geographic location. And that is the smallest technology that we have available to track a bird like a warbler that weighs about 14 grams, about a quarter. That little device weighs 4/10 of a gram. It's actually pretty unbelievable to think about it. And we put that, I'll show you a photo of how exactly we put that on the bird. So the miniature technology getting smaller, and really just in my time with Audubon, it's amazing how much it has evolved. And we all see technology evolving everywhere, right? But something that's getting smaller and smaller that can actually function like a little computer, that's kind of how I would describe it, except that it doesn't connect to satellites. That is what we're actually using to get some of the data, which you'll see in just a little bit. So this is what a geolocator looks like, just to give you a sense. This is the device itself. This little end of it is the light stalk. Interestingly, we use what we call harness, and we call them backpacks, like we put a backpack on the bird, but it's not truly like a backpack. It doesn't go over their wings. It actually goes up over their legs, and it sits on their back. So you think warblers are kind of like hunched over. They're more than that. I just can't. I'm not going to go that low. But you get a sense of what I'm talking about. And then, so here you see that light stalk sticking out. This little device is actually, you can buy it at Hobby Lobby for $2. It's like stretch magic. It's like jewel, which you might use to make like jewelry beads. It's just an elastic piece of plastic, kind of like a rubber band. Has a little bit more give to it. And if you pull it as hard as you could, you can't break it. So it sits on the bird as they add weight, which they do throughout the year, and lose weight throughout the year. It's going to give and take a little bit with them. And we essentially catch the bird and we put it on their back, we send the bird off, and you hope that you recapture it. Our most famous bird, I think, and the very first bird that we ever tagged was a bird called Longshot. And it was the first year that we ever did this project. We had exactly one geolocator to put out. That is not doing a good research project. That is not putting odds in your favor. Generally, you want to put out 5, 10, something along those lines. I won't go into the history of it. We ended up with one band, one tag at the end of the season, in our first season doing this. And we put this on this bird, and we said, okay, good luck. You know, our former director was like, it's a long shot. I will never forget. We put that on that bird. It was July 4th, right after Independence Day, 2014. And the bird showed back up at Biden April 4th, 2015. And actually, it was really hard to catch him to get this little device off of him. In fact, in this photo, this is the photo that was taken of him back in, it was in April 2015. You just see the tip of the little light stalk sticking out. But we did actually recover that little device. Now, somewhat of a famous bird up at Beidler. And the data from Longshot, as well as several other birds, was put into the very first study that was ever published on the migration of Prothonotary warblers. There's a couple of interesting things I want you to notice about this map. So the different colors represent different states. So what I love about our work with Audubon is, yes, we can study these little birds at Beidler, but we work collaboratively. So what we were doing at Beidler was being done in multiple other states. We were pairing it all together. So you're actually getting like a range-wide look at the migration of this bird, not just a touch point from Beidler. And what's interesting to note about this is that regardless of where these birds nested, so we had Louisiana, this was Arkansas, Ohio, Wisconsin, Virginia, South Carolina, and these birds took different routes, but they all convened on Colombia, South America. In fact, that was the main takeaway from our study, is that Colombia appears to be a critically important place for species like Prothonotary warblers, because what we're seeing is that across their range, they're all convening on the same place. And I like to get kind of nerdy, like if you think about it from a conservation perspective, where a bird migrates to and how they're going there is so important. You might say, duh, yes, that's important. But if you think about a bird like Prothonotary warblers, they nest along the Atlantic coast, like in wetlands along the Atlantic coast, or like the Atlantic basin, I guess you would say, and then across the Mississippi River basin. They like to be over standing water, so we were in the Appalachians, kind of a lot of them there. So they're somewhat have these like discrete populations. You might hypothesize, I bet the Mississippi River birds all go to one place and the Atlantic coast birds go to another. And in some species, we see that. We did a project on Swenson's warblers, and that is exactly what happened. They like showed what we would call migratory connectivity. There's a connectivity between their breeding grounds and their wintering grounds. Now, with Prothonotaries, this is kind of a fascinating thing to think about, because then you think, well, there could just be, some core places that are important for them in one or two countries that if we can protect and make an impact, could significantly help us conserve the species versus having to work across multiple countries. Okay, thank you for going me down that slightly nerdy road. So again, support from people of that when I came to Audubon, previous work that had been done, miniaturization of technology, and then Audubon's network. What I think is so cool about what Audubon has done is that we have, just in my time, evolved into truly a hemisphere-wide organization. And with our latest strategic plan, I pulled this quote out of it just because I think it's intentional about thinking about our work like the birds, right? Because the birds aren't paying attention to what country, they're just where I'm supposed to migrate, I guess. So we have to then work the same way that they do. And what we have done is developed not only just projects and partnerships, we have staff that work in multiple countries across this hemisphere. And this shows just some of our kind of core areas, but I want to mention Colombia, across Canada, Mexico, and looking at other countries in Latin America. But the cool thing for me is that as we developed this, as we got this research and realized how important Colombia was, I had somebody in Colombia that I could literally call that works for Audubon that's how do we work together? And so very few organizations have that ability, because what I'm about to talk to you about could not have been done without somebody on the Audubon team working in Colombia. So what we did was we worked with our partners in Colombia. Beidler Forest turned 50 last year. We had a big celebration of that. We originally dedicated in 1974, so 2024 was our 50th anniversary. And our most exciting thing that we unveiled, which was a first for the Audubon Network, was a partnership with a sister center in Colombia, South America, that we basically had developed because that's where our bird research is telling us that the birds go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that place, and we're going to get back to that me dancing at the school. So we'll come back to that. We'll get back to that for sure. So this is actually Camilo. I'll show a photo of him, but on our 50th anniversary, we did a live signing of a sister center agreement with the mayor of Barranquilla, and then Rebecca Haynes, who's our executive director of Audubon, South Carolina. And they actually, it was adorable. They had a whole dance set up for us, but it was a bad connection. So we really couldn't tell what was going on, but we were clapping. I think you were there. It was awkward, but we had a great time. But they printed out some of our 50th anniversary signs and had them on display. It was very adorable. So we'll talk a little bit about this place and about Colombia. Has anybody ever been birding in Colombia? Anybody ever been to Colombia? But not birding. So, okay, here we are, right? Northern South America. About 2,500 miles as the Prothonotary Warbler flies one way. And I think the most notable thing I'll say about Colombia is the most species-rich country on earth for birds. 20% of the world's population of birds, of the world's species of birds occur in Colombia. 2,100 species of birds have been documented in Colombia. I mean, so if you like birding, it's pretty awesome. Anywhere down in Central and South America, I gotta say, as a birder, I've been I started with Costa Rica, then Panama, now Colombia. I'm it is addicting, because all the birds that we have here, they also migrate down there, and then they got all the other birds you might think of, and toucans and mots and all the cool other cool stuff. So critically important country for birds, Prothonotary warblers, and a lot of other migratory birds. So I just want to make that point. Also a really fun and nice place to travel. And I'm going to zoom in on the town here I mentioned in my title, Barranquilla. It's on the coast, one of the most important cities in the Caribbean in terms of a port, and then the fourth largest city in Colombia. But it is that sort of, if you imagine, I'm a Prothonotary warbler, I'll show you some more data later, but you saw from that map on a couple slides ago, these birds are coming down and they're either crossing over to like the Yucatan Peninsula and sort of making their way down through Central America, or they're crossing over to Cuba and crossing to the Caribbean, but like there along the Colombian coast is sort of the first place that they are stopping. So it is kind of a really important place as these birds are migrating south. It's going to be the first place in somewhere like Colombia that they are likely to get to. And if you look at Barranquilla, you get a sense of kind of what it looks like. It's sort of hard to tell. The big national park over here to what would be, I guess, the southeast. And then the area that we will be talking about is located right here outside of the city. And this is, this is called the, in Spanish, Ciénaga de Mallorquín Eco Park, which is a several hundred acre eco park located right on the outskirts of the city. And a couple things I want to point out here. One, here's downtown, right? So very close proximity, large city, 1.2 million people that live in Barranquilla. And you have this large area called a ciénaga, which is roughly translates to like estuary or swamp. So it's a large wetland habitat. I'll show you some photos. I have some videos later actually. But it's really fascinating because it is huge. You look down on like one of our marshes at high tide, where you see mostly water, but theirs has no tidal change, and it always stays like 2 feet deep. So we would see people literally out in the middle of it, hundreds of yards out, and they're knee-deep water, and they're just sort of wading along in knee-deep water. Very fascinating. It's also where the Magdalena River meets the Caribbean. The Magdalena River is probably like what our colleague down there said, it's like the Nile River of Colombia. It's the longest river in Colombia, and it's a super important one. The Magdalena River itself and the Magdalena River Valley is actually one of the most important places for birds. A lot of endemic birds that don't occur anywhere else are found in that area. And then here you're talking about where the Magdalena River actually meets the coast. Last thing I'll point out is this little area here, which is sort of like a sandbar. I'll come back to that in a second. I did not know that existed until we got there, and I'll show you why I think it's cool. The other really cool thing about this place, yes, there's the connection to Prothonotaries, but they also have a really awesome boardwalk. We have a really awesome boardwalk. We're like, this is like a match made in heaven. They have actually a much larger boardwalk than we do. They just opened like 2 years ago, and they built this big boardwalk. It's kind of unbelievable, but they have a boardwalk that sort of, again, goes along the edge of the ciénaga or estuary, and all of this forest that you're looking at are mangroves. Mangroves are a wetland habitat that you find in Central and South America. They're critically important to a lot of migratory species. If you know anything about mangroves across the world, they're also a very threatened habitat. They grow along the coast, just like our coastal habitats. They are susceptible to development, but they are important not only for birds, but for things like fish and shrimp, and a lot of coastal aquatic species are, they're the nurseries. Mangroves can be the nurseries for those, where a lot of those little fish and things are living. So mangroves are very, very critically important in addition to the broader habitat. So I'm going to go through a couple slides here. A year ago, I got a chance to visit. I kind of weaseled my way into a visit down there. I was already going on a birding trip to Colombia, and I was like, hey, you guys at Audubon, you mind if I just hang out and go over and check this place out while I'm down there? It'll be easier, it'll be cheaper. And again, having leadership that supports you, they were like, yeah, that would be awesome. So a colleague of mine actually got to go down. It's been a couple days at the park, getting to know the folks there, getting to see the place, do some birding. Again, it's a surreal thing to look at a Prothonotary warbler and then look over the next bird is like a toucan. You're like, how do these two come together? Just get a sense of what it looks like. You've got mangrove forest. Again, reminds me of a Beidler to a degree. Again, not the canopy is a little bit more open, but You're walking on this big, beautiful boardwalk. So you have sort of smaller portions of the boardwalk, much larger portions on the boardwalk as well that overlook the Cienega. They have also built these amazing observation towers. This one, my colleague pointed out, you go up one way and you go down another. So they're like, just engineering-wise, it was kind of like baffling. It was almost like an optical illusion. But to get a sense of what it looked like from the view of the top. Yeah. These were some of our in-country partners that were showing us around. And by the way, it'll be hard to see, but coming across the screen here, where are there? There's some brown pelicans flying across there. So again, felt like home to some degree. And this, again, this big, beautiful observation decks. This was a class that we ran into while we were there. We actually stopped and talked to the class, and the students had prepared Prothonotary Warbler related art that they gave to us. They're like, oh my gosh. But very cool to get to see, again, the local communities using the site. In addition to, I think birding for them is kind of a new, they are I say they, I'm not trying to encapsulate the whole country, but for the most part, they found that people like to be outside, they like to use the park. Birding is kind of was a newer concept. Just I was like, I came to Colombia to go birding, and they were like, why? So just explain, because again, these are birds they probably see all the time, right? They don't, it's not like that where I live. So then we got to go on a boat, and we got to go out to the little sandbars that I was talking about. And out on those sandbars, they had mangroves, and then they were actually working on restoring mangroves. So they were going out and planting new mangroves, trying to restore this habitat. And on the edges of the mangroves were these sandbars. So myself, this is my colleague Sherry Fields. She works for Audubon here in South Carolina, and then Camilo Gardozo. He's the Colombia director for Audubon, so he works in Colombia across the country on things related to birds. So he's really the person that helps us. But this was Raul. He was the in-country. He was like the bird expert of Cienega, which was really cool. So he showed us around, just getting a sense of what we saw. Again, mangroves, and you look out over the city of Barranquilla at these mud flats. And this was like the aha moment for me. Going down there, I was like, we will see Prothonotary warblers. I'm sure we will. We saw them everywhere. We also, I was telling Alan earlier, I was like, we just photoshopped out the top of that. And I showed you this. You might be like, is that Seabrook or Gila? Or is that somewhere? There were all of these coastal birds that I'm like, these are our birds. These are the same birds that we see here. Just to give you a sense of some of the ones that we saw: marble godwits, Wilson's plovers, blue storks, greater yellowlegs, brown pelicans, a whole bunch of different sandpipers, black-necked stilts, and a lot of those birds nest there or migrate there. And so in my mind, I'm like, Prothonotary warblers connect us, but we are connected by more birds than just Prothonotaries. And so building this connection in my mind is Prothonotary is the catalyst, but really there are lots of birds that we share, and there are lots of things that we can learn from each other. And I think that is really where we're taking off now. So this trip is how I got to a school in Colombia, because the other really cool thing that they're doing there, and particularly in Barranquilla, they have a huge emphasis on English as a second language. And in a lot of the schools, they make it mandatory that the students learn English. So they took us to a school, and I felt bad. I'm like, I'm coming to your country. I don't know Spanish. I'm glad that you all have been learning English. I've been attempting to learn Spanish. In fact, we did an entire tour around the school, and this young lady was our guide. She did the whole thing. She did it in English. This was actually her teacher, but she followed in the back the whole time. She's like, the student has been preparing for y'all to be here, so she's going to lead you all around. They had a pet crocodile, that they kept in the school. I was like, y'all were doing way cooler stuff. It was really amazing. And the school was very wooded, so they got a whole thing where they wanted to either replant it or keep it forested in order to benefit birds and other wildlife. So that was a kind of key focus. So we got to take a picture with everyone, and then of course we got to see the dancing and all the things that you saw earlier. So what we've done since then has been working on how can we better build this partnership, right? And what I'm finding is again, we share a lot of the same species, but even some of their concerns, they're like, how do we have a lot of development in this area. How do we make sure we're developing in a smart way? I'm like, we're asking ourselves that in South Carolina. They're like, we want to make sure that the water quality is high. I'm like, look, you care about the water quality? So there's all of these themes that I find to be very inspiring. So what we have done is, and I think even here on Seabrook, you do a little bit of the coastal stewardship work, where we're watching these places that the coastal birds are either migrating or nesting. So we had our staff, we have 2 staff members that work on the coast in South Carolina, Aaron Rogers, Abby Burke, if you have met any of them, but they do a training for volunteers to go out and teach beachgoers about birds, the seabirds and shorebirds that are nesting. So we said, hey, let's have them hop on a webinar and train the staff down at Cienega. So we had about 50 folks join from down there that jumped on. We did a whole stewardship training of here's how we approach it. And our challenges there's some similarities, there's probably some differences, but just to give you a sense of here are some of the things. And so we've shared with them training materials. They really wanted to know, in talking about Beidler, we do a lot of night programs, and they were fascinated by that. They're like, what do you mean? We go out until the habitat at night. We're like, why? We're like, oh, there's a lot of really cool things. They're like, can you tell us how to do this? So we were sending them program materials, here's how we're thinking about it. But I also need a lot to learn from them. At Beidler, we see about 10,000 people every year. They've been over for a year and a half. I think in their first 9 months, they saw 100,000 people. Because they're right at the city, and people love the outdoor experience. They said they did a viewing of quick aside, and when I flew into Barranquilla, I was like, man, there's a lot of people wearing yellow on this flight. What's going on? Turns out the Colombian national team was playing in Barraquila that day, soccer, and nobody works when that's happening. So our guy came and picked us up from the airport, and he's like, we're just gonna go to a bar and watch the game. There's nothing else to do. So we did that, which was really fun. But I can't remember why I told that story, but anyway, a lot of the similarities are the same. And again, I was saying that that's right. He said they did a viewing during Copa or one of the other big South American soccer tournaments at Cienega. They did like a rented a screen. They had 20,000 people come. I can't even imagine what that's like. Anyway, just a lot to learn from them, and they have an interest in learning from us. It's like the shared knowledge. The latest thing they've been doing is they just put up signage about Prothonotary Warblers and about Beidler Forest in English and Spanish. This is actually that was just shared with you last week at their site. And so we're going to be doing some similar signage at Beidler, talking about, again, this connection. And so for me, I'm like, this is a process that has played out over a decade, and it's really cool to get to see physically on the ground where some of this work is happening, all because of what we've learned about the tracking of these little birds. So that's how I ended up. Dancing at a school in Colombia. The combination of technology, research, partnerships, community, and of course, following the birds. That is the end of my formal presentation. In the last couple of minutes, I thought you guys would like to see a sneak peek of the latest Prothonotary Warbler tracking data. You are the first group to see this outside of Audubon. You are sworn to secrecy. I know this is being recorded, so if you're on the internet watching, please close your eyes or don't share this. But this was, we talked about the evolution of the technology, right? The first geolocators we used collected light levels. They gave us data. Of course, a lot of people started using this technology on other birds, and we're realizing that it's good data. It's better than anything we've ever had. It's not super precise. So what else can we do? So we have replicated the study in 2024. Again, we can't track the birds in real time, so we have to recapture these birds in 2025. And we just got data from one of the devices from a bird in South Carolina. Paula, you have not even seen this yet. As someone who works a lot with us, and I thought I would just quickly show y'all the evolution of this technology. So this geolocator looks essentially the same, goes on the bird the same. This one also collects barometric pressure. So it's collecting light levels and it's collecting pressure. And somebody developed this crazy statistical software that analyzes both of them and sort of spits out the data in a usable format. And so this is what we used last year. It didn't add really any weight to the device. Obviously, we're very sensitive to how much it weighs, and we don't want to put it on the bird. We think it's going to impact the bird. Obviously, all of what we're doing is like with the bird's health in mind. But combining barometric pressure and light levels seems to be very, very accurate. And actually now there's multiple studies going on right now that are using that same data just because it seems to be the best top technology that currently exists. So here's what you get, a little sneak peek of the birds of South Carolina. And I know this is hard to see, but the cool thing about it is that these are all dates, date ranges. And so we'll actually get to click through and see the dates change as the bird moves. And the lighter the color, like the closest to yellow, the more accurate we think that that location is. The closer to like pink or purple, the less likely, okay? So this is a bird that has started its migration. This would have been in 2024, August 21st, between August 21st, 25th, it moved from South Carolina down to Florida. From August 26th to 28th, it made the trans-Gulf flights. So it flew, again, somewhere along the Florida Peninsula across to Yucatan. It stayed around there for a while, around between September 11th and September 12th, and it made its way down into like Nicaragua, Honduras. And by September 26th, so about a week and a half later, it made its way down and it wintered somewhere around where Panama meets Colombia. And it was at this site from September 26th to March 10th. So we know this bird wintered somewhere in that area. And again, if you saw that first map I did with all the different lines, this is showing right that same area where these birds were going. All right, let's watch this bird take its northbound trip. So March 10th, it's leaving. March 12th, it's back up in Honduras, Nicaragua. March 14th, it has made its way over to the coast of Nicaragua, Honduras. It was there for about 10 days. And then between March 24th and March 25th, it remade that cross Gulf trip. Again, taking advantage probably of the right weather conditions. And then by April 4th, it was back at the swamp with Beidler. Not just back in the swamp with Beidler, but right back at that same spot. In fact, this particular bird nested right where the boardwalk first forks. And we banned it originally, I think, 2020, so it was an older bird. Again, right? The same spot we caught it to put the geolocator on. It's the same spot we caught it to take the geolocator on. Really, truly unbelievable. So that is all that I've got. There's a lot, this is cool work that we're doing. I kind of told you this from my perspective, as these are things that I have learned. Obviously, this is stuff that a bunch of people have worked on, and I'm just sort of presenting it from my perspective. But a ton of people, between volunteers, people that have taught us how to track Aaron Gibbon, as some of y'all know, is on Kiowa, has been really instrumental in this work over the years. A lot of colleagues at Audubon, runs the whole gamut, a whole list of people that I could thank that really, and we don't know all the questions, right? We're still learning, but you're getting more clarity on not only where they're going, but what are those stopover sites. Here's the other really important thing I've read. Pressure data tells you height. So you know when those birds are migrating, and you know how high they are going. And that's really, really important as well. So we're honing in more on a bird. Again, these little birds that are 14 grams can do that. It's 5,000 miles round trip, right? And we know more about them, about what they're doing now than we ever have. And so it's really, really kind of amazing. There are things that you can do. Again, this work isn't cheap. Each one of those devices is about $300, so that doesn't cost what it takes us, our time to put it together, to download the data, all those sorts of things. As a nonprofit, we're always looking for contributions to support the work. You can visit, whether that's Beidler Forest or go down to Barranquilla, Colombia. Tell them you learned about Prothonotary Warblers in South Carolina. You want to see what they're doing here? I can tell you they will be 100% delighted that you were there. I told them people were coming birding in Colombia. People want to come birding down there because of all the species that there are. They're like, we have to prepare. I was like, people aren't coming tomorrow, but I really like people that want to go, We're report what you're seeing. I heard you mention eBird earlier. That kind of data, some of the maps I'll show you, we use eBird data all the time. So even just those one sightings you have, any of the common birds, super really important. Educating other people, which y'all are doing as a club. So anyway, lots you can do. I'm gonna stop there. Happy to take questions.
Gosh, let's thank Matt for that. I'm pretty sure you do have questions. Go ahead.
Why don't you go first question?
How do you catch birds? Yeah, I know. You know, I pulled that slide out, but I was like, I'm gonna keep it in because somebody's gonna ask. So that's my next slide. How do we catch the birds, right? We trick them. It's very tricky. We use a decoy, so we take a fake bird. Generally, we catch the males. So in the spring, the males establish in defend territories. And the females are nesting. So the females are very difficult to catch. The males we catch using a decoy, and then we'll actually play the song on a speaker near the decoy. I know it's kind of like cheating, but it's really the only way that we can do it. But in the middle of the spring, when they're all amped up and they're defending, like I've heard people be like, you could put a tennis ball out there, remotely yellow, you play the song. I find that some birds you will catch in like 30 seconds. I mean, like immediately. Some birds it can take 20 minutes, and yeah, they're just like not sure. They fly over the net, and if you caught them before, that can be tough to catch them again. Which again, we're usually catching them if we want to take the device off. But we can't tell them that, so they're very, very, but
This is like a butterfly net?
this is like, I'll show you. So this is like a, this is a long, like 20, 30 foot net. And if you'll notice, so this Prothonotary is in the net. The hardest thing is getting them to fly into the net. Once we get them in the net, everything from there is easy. Again, assuming when you know what you're doing, which I should say, everything that I do, all of my colleagues, we all have to have state and federal permits. To get a permit, you have to show you've done X number of time handling, all that. Sort of like, again, the safety of the birds, the health of the birds is the most important thing. But essentially, we entice them to hit this net, and you'll notice there's like little pockets. So they hit the net, they fall in, and the nets are very specially designed. They're called mist nets. They're very, very fine netting. If you were to look at it, if I set it like across this room, like you would look right through it, so the birds don't see it. So they fly into the net. Once they're in the net, again, we get a series of bands. We get a sense of the size of those bands. The bands are custom fit to the size of the bird, the size of the leg, right? So if it's a bigger bird, you get a bigger band. So we know exactly what size band the Prothonotary Warbler is going to wear. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, every bird is a unique color band combination. So we change bands every year, so we know we're never seeing the same bird. Birds only live about, like the longevity record for Prothonotary is like 9 years. So I think last year we started reusing bands from like our first year, because we were like, yeah, I think there's no not likely that those birds are still around. But we do have at least one bird. We have a couple birds. We have one over 2019, I think. So we have a 6 or 7 year old Prothonotary right now. Or well, that was that Bible this spring. And then we take some basic measurements, try to determine how old they are, and we let them go.
What's your recovery rate on the geolocating?
It's a good question, yes. Our recovery rate is about 40%. 30% is generally what you're looking for. It's like, that would be a good, that would just be considered good. If it's substantially lower than that, we would start asking questions around the units themselves, which also is there is a bunch of studies that have done like how heavy of a thing can you put on a bird. So we know we have like we're not just guessing there. We know exactly how we can't go over this way, and then we usually have a control bird, right? And we're not seeing big differences between. So we'll ban some that don't have geolocators, and we'll ban some that do, and we look to see, is it about the same percentage? So anywhere around 30% is good. We got about 40%, which we were pretty happy with that. But every bird that migrates doesn't survive. So you're never going to get them all back. Which makes it even more important how we got a long shot back. We had one that was not 100%. Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, have you found birds that you banded where it was obvious the device came off, or?
No. We have never had a bird that I know of that has returned without its device, which speaks to how, and honestly, this year, I mean, I'll be honest, so we recovered several, but the two ones that I recovered this year, one bird I took it off and it was almost as if you never would have known it had been on. The other bird, there was some abrasion on its back, like it'll rub just a little bit, but you know, the bird, again, like the bird just flew 2,500 miles back here, I mean, it's probably okay. So it you know, it can there'll be a spot where they didn't grow feathers, but that stretch magic does a great job. And so I don't think we've ever had a bird that studies have. And I know some other locations where this study has been done had that happen. We have not, so it does happen, but not often.
There's like an average amount of geolocators you have at like a certain time, like right now. How many birds have them?
That's a good question. So we don't do this every year. Because they cost a lot, because we want to make sure that we are, so this latest study I just was showing all the data from, that's also done across multiple states. And it just takes a lot of time. Like you gotta go out and catch them, and then you gotta go out and not only recover the devices, but you gotta put in the effort to search for the birds. Sometimes they come back to the same territories, occasionally they don't, and we're like, that bird's out here somewhere. Anyway, it takes a lot of time to work on. So at any given time, like right now, it's 0 because, well, I guess theoretically there could be birds still out there that we never recaptured. I did have one bird. I'm hopping around here, but interesting stories. We had one bird as part of the original study that it came back the following year, along with, I think we ended up, the first day we recovered 5 of 12. The most we put out is about 12, so to answer that question. But the one bird, it came back with its device. I couldn't catch it. I tried all summer long. That bird, you would play the song, the decoy, and that bird would just, I mean, it was live, right? I mean, I had to get, and so I didn't catch it. So it left, and it came back the next year with its device still on. Couldn't catch it. And at the end of the season, it was luckily it was nesting in a cavity, and I set the net up right in front of the cavity. I was like, I was out of ideas. I was like, I don't know what else to do. And it would fly up like it was going in the cavity, and then it would hover in the air and fly over it, and go into the box. I mean, y'all. Anyway, I had to like stand behind a tree, and I jumped out, and I flushed. I mean, we got flushed into the net. Got the device off. So they become worried to it. And again, it's one of those existential moments. You think, how did I get to where I am? Standing up behind a tree out in the swamp. But at any one time, we have been putting out, it's usually 12 or 14. And then we'll do that across a couple of different sites. We don't do them all at Beidler. We have a couple other places in the greater Charleston area. Old St. Canal Park, which is in Monk's Corners, nice swampy park. Where we put out some other devices as well.
Do the hatchlings return to Beidler Forest?
Say what?
The hatchlings.
What a great question. We don't know what the hatcheries are doing. So we banned a good number of fledglings or of nestlings. So I was showing y'all earlier the photos of the birds on the nest and the ages. I was saying this one's about day 2, day 10. We have a 5-day window from when they're old enough that their legs have grown as large as they're going to be. You can safely put a band on them to when they fledge. So we're not working hard enough where we're out there on that 5. We know every bird's 5-day window. So we will ban some fledglings. We have never seen one from one year to the next. So, I mean, to be honest, a lot of them aren't surviving. There's baby things that produce more than they can survive. But surely some of them do. Where do they go? You know, they can't all come back to the same territory. At other places, they do see them. I mean, they're coming back, I think, to the general area, but maybe not to that same territory. But they're harder to track, and you're not putting a geolocator right on a little baby bird, right? So That is a good question that we do not know the answer to, and I know others have been trying to figure out how do you understand that when you don't necessarily have an adult bird that you're not, again, you can't put like a transmitter on. So TBD.
I know when we were in Costa Rica, excuse me, the universities down there have degrees in ecotourism.
Mm-hmm.
And the guides that go out in the preserves and such are extremely knowledgeable and everything. Do you see that down in Barraquilla, or do you see that perhaps developing in Barranquilla?
It's the latter, and both in birding down there and at Barranquilla, at the eco park, they are realizing that is that people will come to do that, and and I've birded around Bogota and other places. And I remember birding one location that we went to for lunch, and they were like, literally while we were there building like a lodge, they were like, oh, this is going great, we're going to add on and provide housing. And so I think because, the history of the country, it is not maybe quite as, they've not been doing it quite as long as places like Costa Rica, which I feel like you can go just in a lot of different places there and find a lot of, so the guides are there in Colombia. I don't know, just like the infrastructure, maybe I would say. Again, this is just my opinion, unlimited. I'm just realizing this is being recorded, so somebody please don't quote me on this. They're amazing, fantastic guides all across Central and South America. I would say maybe the infrastructure for housing people, itineraries that could accommodate larger groups of people. In my experience, is not quite the same as it was in Costa Rica, but the birding is unparalleled. And the main reason we have the Andes in Costa Rica, in Colombia, they divide into 3 ranges, and with every 2,000 or 3,000 feet change in elevation, you're getting a different bird community or different species. So there's 3 ranges, and on each slope of one range, on one side or the other, it's not necessarily the same birds. So just at the Andes, you have 6 different slopes. This goes up to 14 or 15,000 feet elevation. You got the Amazon, you got the Magdalena River Valley. So it's just an abundance of habitat types. But to answer your question, yeah, I think it's coming along, and I want people to come birding, and it is exceptional birding. So if you're considering it or are looking for somewhere to go, I would highly suggest it. Just a great experience all the way around.
I'm going to sneak one question.
Okay.
I was a little bit surprised because at Beidler, the birds are around non-saltwater.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like in Colombia, it's brackish.
It could be,
right? So are
right.
they tolerant of different ecosystem, or are they not? Or are they going inland or staying along the rivers?
Right. It's a good question. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Yeah. Down there, I think you have a difference between breeding and non-breeding habitats.
Yes.
So things like northern water thrushes, another type of warbler, we can see a lot of those down there in the winter. There's also nests in North America, freshwater streams, ponds. So, it's not just Prothonotary. I think they're attracted to the water itself. And I don't know, I don't know well enough about mangroves. I know down there you're getting some salt water, but it was certainly a mix, and maybe a mix of brackish.
Right.
And I think maybe they were telling us it changes based on the amount of rain. So it's not entirely saltwater, but the question would be, can they tolerate entire saltwater? I'm not sure.
Or their food is in that area, right? And so they tolerate it.
They're tolerant, yes, but they're probably also accessing a freshwater source somewhere. Yeah.
Anyway, one more question. Go ahead. Sorry,
Have when you were talking about fledglings not coming, like you banding fledglings and you haven't seen them come back, is there a possibility that they migrate to Colombia and then when they go back north, they go to like the Mississippi River Valley? Like,
It's a good question. I don't know. I will say this, that, and this applies to adults, but we banned adults at Beidler, and then we have another site where we banned adults that's about 20 miles away. We are not at all worried about an adult from Beidler that we banned at Beidler showing up there. The likelihood of that is so insignificant, so small. But with fledglings, maybe. So that's the thing, we don't know what they're doing. My hypothesis would be that they are returning to the same region, but probably not like going entirely off course, right? Like switching to a different state or something. And I don't know if it's been studied in other warblers and if there's research that exists on what that is. And I know across my colleagues and talking about fledglings, that it's like one of those things where it's like, what are those little things doing? Because also then, you need to ban a lot of them, because a lot of them aren't, maybe aren't surviving the journey. I don't think it's a good question. I can tell you what, a couple years, when you go to college and you study birds, you look into this, you come and you present to this group. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a good question. I don't know. And I would think they're not venturing that far back, but potentially not coming back to the, they're not showing that same site fidelity that the adults are showing.
This is a question for you to consider during your sabbatical. Would you consider leading a trip to Colombia?
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't even mean the
I'm
sabbatical.
signing up.
We have a sign-up sheet at the back. No, I would like to, and I would, you should talk to our executive director, but I would love to do that. I would love to bring more people down for people to go. I know that they are even working on things like itineraries, because the site is awesome, and you would definitely want to spend some time around. They have a lot of community engagement work I didn't talk about. But there are also multiple other great birding sites within an hour or 2 hours. So you really could put together an amazing itinerary and then focus it around the work that's happening at the Eco Park, which would include boardwalk and boat rides, which is cool. So I know they are working on that, and I also would love to incentivize people going down here from South Carolina or anywhere, and we could go down. In fact, I was just looking at eBird today down there. They're already seeing dozens of Prothonotary Warblers down there. So clearly the birds just showed back up. So it'd be cool to go at a time of year when you could see both, but I would 100% consider it.
With dance lessons?
If you tip right, yes.
And listen, before you finish college, we'll have to have Matt back to update us.
That's right,
where the
yes.
rest of this is
The
going.
next presentation will be in Colombia.
Yeah,